Hey everyone, in this video you'll learn to build your own acoustic ceiling panels and hang them as clouds in your home studio. This video is broken up into 4 parts and each part should take you about a day to complete. So let's jump into it. This tutorial will yield you 4 panels. These are 4 acoustic dampening panels made to suspend from the ceiling. They're going to be 2 feet wide, 4 feet in length, and 6 inches of depth for serious absorption. For tools, you will need some kind of staple gun and a bunch of staples. You'll also need a drill, a saw, and some PPE for the installation, and an extra set of hands for construction and mounting the clouds. For the materials, we're going to need a package of 24-inch Rockwool, an 8-pack because we're going to be using 2 pieces for each cloud. We're going to need 1 sheet of 4 feet by 8 feet, 3/8 of an inch plywood cut into 6-inch strips at the hardware store. Then some scrap wood for the corner supports. We're gonna be using some small pieces, 1 inch by 1 inch sticks. And some extra wood or kind of an elastic or something to keep the Rockwool from sagging in the middle. I just ended up using a couple extra strips from the plywood. You're gonna need 8 of these, 2 for each panel. Finally, you'll need 32 2-inch hooks and 8 to 10 feet of chain. Then for the covering, you're going to need around 12 meters of cotton fabric cut to fit. My last video covers how to cut and measure out this fabric. For this build, the dimensions for the front piece, which is the larger piece, is going to be 62 inches by 38 inches. So that's the length, 48 inches, plus twice the depth, so 6 inches times 2. Okay, so we're adding 12 inches to the 48, plus a safety 2 inches to allow for a clean fold over when we go to staple it. So in total, that's 62 inches. Now for the width, that's 24 inches width, plus twice the depth, so 12 inches, plus another safety 2 inches to allow for a clean fold, so 38 inches in total. For the back piece, which is the smaller piece, we're gonna have 50 inches by 26 inches. So the length is again 48, and we're just gonna allow an extra 2 inches to allow for a clean fold. And again, it's just gonna be the width plus an extra 2 inches to allow for a clean fold. So pretty simple. If you need some more direction, go watch that other video. Okay, on day 2, we're going to build the cloud exposure. We're gonna measure the 6-inch boards to size. We're gonna have 8 42-inch boards for the length, and 8 24-inch boards for the width. So make sure that you measure from both sides to get a true measurement. The hardware store tag is rarely accurate. If you measure out 4 feet from each end of an 8-foot board, you'll likely have this little section in the middle. Now, once all your boards are measured, cut them to length with a handsaw. Next, we'll measure where the screws will connect with the corner supports. You're going to want to offset each side because we are going to put in another set of screws on the other side of the corner. Now, once the measurements have been marked, use a drill to make pilot holes in each end of your boards. Next, line up the boards into the shape of the frame and add the corner supports. Then, hold the 2 sides together and drill pilot holes into the side of the corner support. This is where you want the help of another person to hold everything together. Once the pilot holes are drilled, screw the pieces together and repeat the process for all 4 corners. Because these panels are suspended from the ceiling, we'll need something in the middle to keep the insulation from sagging. You could staple some kind of elastic fabric across the body. I've seen that work. For this design, I used some scrap pieces of plywood cut to fit the length of the panel, and I placed 2 strips in the middle of the panel, dividing the length of the frame into thirds. Then I used a nail gun to tack them in place on each side. This will give some extra structure to our clouds and keep the Rockwool from sagging in the middle. Finally, we'll drill some pilot holes on the back of the corner supports for our screw holes. An easy way to do this is to use a painter's stir stick as a template to ensure your holes are evenly placed. But don't add the screw hooks yet. Next, we'll wrap the panels in fabric and then fill them with insulation. All right, day 3, we're gonna wrap and fill the clouds. So use a staple gun to staple the middle of one of the long sides. Then stretch out the other side tight and staple the middle of that side. Staple along the length of the panel, pulling the fabric tight and ensuring that it remains straight. Repeat this on the short sides of the panel and really make sure to pull and guide the fabric to make sure that it's wrinkle-free and taut with each staple. And don't get too crowded with the staples. Try and leave yourself enough room for another layer of staples when you're putting on the back piece of fabric. Fold the corners around the frame to form a clean pleat. Then staple the excess fabric to the inside of your frame. Once you've finished stapling all 4 corners, go around and hammer in any staples that didn't quite make it. Once your front piece of fabric is in place, carefully lift 2 layers of Rockwool Safe and Sound into your frame. Position it snug in the panel, but don't compress it too much, okay? We want the fluffiness, which is why you should really open this bag about a day in advance of this step so that you can let the insulation expand. It should expand to about 3 inches, which should allow plenty of room to stuff 2 sheets of this stuff into our 6-inch deep frame. Once the Rockwool is in, lay the back piece of fabric and repeat the stapling process, making sure to keep your fabric tight with every staple. When you come to the corners, staple them into the side, but don't worry about that little flap at the end. We're going to secure that with the screw hooks, which you can actually use the paint stir template from before to find the pilot holes through the fabric. Simply use a small nail to pierce the fabric and then screw the hook in by hand. If it gets too tight, use a screwdriver or pliers to give you some more leverage. Finally, clean off your clouds with a shop vac and you're ready to hang them. All right, day 4, we're gonna suspend our clouds. Now, you wanna make sure that you suspend them from the joists in your ceiling. For my project, I'm mounting 2 clouds in the control room and 2 clouds in my recording area. There's a ceiling lamp in the center of both areas, so I'll be placing the clouds about 1 foot or 1/3 of a meter away from the light to minimize shadow and the likelihood that I run into anything electrical. Use a stud finder to measure out the joists in your control room and decide where you want your clouds to suspend. These panels are around 16 pounds each, so you want to make sure that you securely suspend them into the joists. Make sure you're going into wood. Measure out your joists, measure them again, drill your first hole and check that you feel the resistance of the wood. Then screw in the hooks. Finally, measure and hang your chain. You can even angle your clouds with different lengths of chain, like I did in my control room. Get a partner to help you hang the panels. Raise and hook one side and then the other. Use a step stool or ladder if you need it, because this part can be really tricky. I recommend mounting your panels with an air gap of 6 inches above the panel. The rule of thumb being that you leave an air gap between the wall of the same thickness as your panel. This will improve the performance of your panels by reducing the amount of sound that is reflected back into the room, because the waves would have to pass through the panel twice, further reducing reflections and dramatically improving the sound quality of your room. And now that you've installed your new clouds, you're probably wondering how all this acoustic treatment performs. So let's jump into Room EQ Wizard and do some measurements. To do this, you need an interface and a microphone. I'm going to be using an Advanced Audio CM414 condenser microphone, and I'm placing it in the listening position as if it was my head. So it's right in front of my monitors in my listening position, and I tested it with no treatment, and then just with the wall treatment, then with only the clouds, and then with the full treatment, all of our acoustic treatment together, as well as a acoustic blanket hung as a curtain on the back wall behind me. So to compare all these different frequency responses, I'm going to go up to Tools and then Overlays, and that's going to allow us to put all these waves on top of each other. Here we can compare the red line, which is no treatment, and the yellow line, which is our wall treatment. So these are 4-inch Rockwool panels. They're just like the clouds that we made in this video, but they go on the walls and they're only 4 inches thick, so they're 1 sheet of Rockwool each. So you can see that there is a considerable improvement in the upper mid-range, and the lower mid-range really starts to smooth out some of those peaks and valleys and give you a more balanced listening position, which is the most important thing if you're going to be critically listening and mixing music in this space. As we take a look at the cloud measurement on the blue line, you'll notice something funny happens. Some of these troughs get accentuated because we're only treating one surface of the room. Compare that to the yellow line, which shows the benefit to absorption placed on 4 parallel walls. It yields a much tighter response in the upper mid-range. But what I think is truly remarkable is how they all work together, which is the green line. Huge improvement in the mids, even the low mids down to 150 Hertz. You'll notice there's really not much improvement to the bass frequencies. Anything below 100 Hertz really doesn't get affected. If you really want to tackle those bass frequencies, your absorbers are going to need to be thicker and positioned differently. Now let's compare the measurements of 2 different sets of monitors. And here's the same sine sweep on 2 different sets of monitors. The blue line are 4-inch Neumann KH80s, and the green line are Yamaha HS7s. So I think this is really interesting that the Neumanns, despite being only 4 inches, have more low end than the Yamahas. I really did find that they were more boomy and warm and had more presence to the low end. I like checking bass on them to see if I've pushed it too far. So it is interesting to actually confirm that there is some extra information there, despite them being, the smaller cones. They also have more high end as well. That's really interesting. But overall, a huge improvement from the naked room. Huge improvement in the high frequencies down to the low mids. So I definitely recommend the Rockwool insulation as acoustic treatment. I've noticed a huge improvement. I really do find that it's improved the sound of my room. And it's really cool to see the results here on Room EQ Wizard as well. That's it for this project. Thank you for watching this DIY acoustic cloud tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. Leave a like if you did, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to share your project with me and let me know how it went. Thank you so much for watching this video. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. But I can't change things.